In the seasonal getaway episode, part one final couple might have been solidified, but unfortunately, it seems that for everybody else, it's just nothing but drama. So, on the first topic, let's get into what's happening, especially regarding Katarina. And the reason why we're focusing on her is that as of now, her top choices have pretty much either been eliminated, or in the case of Phil, he is now firmly attached to Aries. So it seems for her, the idea is I can go after Quentin or I can go after Chris. Quentin is a little bit more desirable because, muscles, charm, good skin. So, of course, natural selection. But the problem is Janelle is very much possessive when it comes to Quentin. So it's a little bit of a difficulty in order to try to get him away from her. Never mind build something up when it seems like he doesn't even want to enforce some type of boundaries. So with that in mind, since Chris is now free, since he's released just Jessica, and he recognizes that Phil and Aries, they're a good item, so he's going to leave them alone. He's out there. Katarina pursues him. Lee also pursues him since she also knows that Quentin is not going to leave Janelle for her. Never mind that she doesn't really want that smoke with Janelle. But when it comes to Chris, you can definitely tell that he's still part of the process, but at this point, whether or not he'll really find love is hard to say. But we'll get into that later. What matters is, similar to Lee and also Katarina to a point, Sierra's in this place of not knowing what's next for her. Yes, she still has some type of match with Maria, but Maria also has Jessica. And when it comes to Jessica and Maria, yes, they seem closer than Sierra and Maria, but at the same time, they're not necessarily lovey-dovey. But as we'll talk about in the highlights, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe everyone doesn't have to be like Phil and Aries, where almost every time we see Phil, he's rubbing Aries' feet. There are different types of love. But when it comes to this whole situation, Sierra's not feeling the love. She wants to be chased, pursued, feel like a queen, and Maria's not doing that. Maria even confesses that he hasn't really been in love before, so when he's asking Sierra these questions, it's not because she's difficult to love, but because he doesn't know how to love, period. Which kind of switches things up for her, but at the same time, sort of like how Quentin didn't really have the patience or tolerance to help what's her name who got eliminated, help her through her process and her trauma and her issues, there is the question of whether or not Sierra may have that in her to deal with Maria. But even with that said, it doesn't seem that we're going to break the cycle yet and have someone self-eliminate, since I really do think this might be the first season in a very long time that hasn't happened. But let's move on. One of the reasons why Chris is a bit of a complicated character, especially in regards to the ladies who haven't found a match, is that he makes it very clear he's traditional. And while there was some talk when he was still interested in Aries about being fine with a woman having her own thing and all that, he kind of backtracks a bit and really kind of doubles down on gender roles. And while Lee, as usual, is a church mouse about it, might even be fine with it, Katarina, especially when it comes to the social aspect of it, she's not really for it. The financial aspect of the guy paying bills and all that, perfectly fine. But the social aspect that basically pushes the idea that this is me putting words into his mouth, but it seems very akin to what he was saying, that he believes that women should just not take a leadership role because they're emotional. And let's just say between Katarina and Sierra, they don't like that. And unfortunately, Janelle, who gets into the mix because this was a group conversation, she defends Chris, even throws her own 2 cents in. And because her and Kat already have a little back and forth, it causes them to have issues, which of course Quentin doesn't do much about. There is some talk from the men of trying to kind of calm things down, but in the end, Janelle feels insulted. Katarina felt assaulted, and while Katarina was able to let it go, Janelle takes a little bit longer to cool down, and because of that, Quentin is starting to look at her sideways, but not enough for him to potentially look into Katarina as a possible alternative or even leave, which leads to who gets eliminated or not. And the bottom two of this cliffhanger, since for some reason this season loves a good cliffhanger. I think this is what, the third or fourth cliffhanger, so I guess because people aren't self-eliminating, now we're having cliffhangers every episode. But that aside, Sierra and Jessica on the bottom, which means Morier is put into the position of getting rid of one of his top two. But what makes this especially interesting is that Morier doesn't just bring his complications or his difficult time and try to make a decision. He decides to bring in all the stuff the men say. So on a light note, there's the whole Sierra homie thing, but then they're also bringing her doing the most. Jessica, who has really been trying, I mean, she even bought Mary a plate of food, but her being combative is mentioned, which was one of Chris's criticisms, and I don't know why Mario decided to repeat that, especially if these were two of his matches, because now, I don't know about you, but if somebody I was interested in decided to spread that around and then tell me to my face that somebody pounds me combative, again, the question is, if you are somebody that likes me, what did you say back to them? Did you defend me? Why are you telling me that I'm combative? What is up with this? And honestly, I don't know what's the path forward based off of what just happened. But let's get into the predictions. So let's start off with the ladies, since they're the ones who are up for elimination. And honestly, I feel like Sierra has been overdue to get kicked off, because honestly, have the men paid her much attention throughout this whole entire season? The homie vibe criticism has been there since the beginning, and at this point, I'm not saying, I don't mean anything bad, like I'm not saying she's unattractive in personality, physical, anything like that, but it's just, nobody's been checking for her. And then when it comes to Jessica, I want to say, I think we're a little bit too conditioned to think when it comes to love, especially when it comes to public love that's put onto reality TV, social media. It needs to be like Aries and Phil. It needs to be some kind of ideal, rubbing the feet and all that, but not everybody needs that. And I think when it comes to Jessica, we're kind of getting that shift of, there's a need to be lovey-dovey, but have someone look out for you. Really establish that whole best friend, partner type of thing. Maria looked a little bit tired, maybe a little bit overwhelmed or whatever, so she decided to do the extra effort and make him a plate. Think of it like the whole Claire Huxtable in Dr. Huxtable thing, where she was talking to Elvin about making some coffee or whatever, and how Dr. Huxtable bought her some in the morning, so she reciprocated later. That's the kind of relationship I think they have going. It's not going to be cute and overly romantic and, all butterflies. It's just going to be somebody who you can rely on, who's dependable, looks good on your arm, but has their own thing going on, where it's not an interdependency. It's more so two independent people who share a life together. Switching to the men, it's between Maria and Chris, obviously, because Quentin's not going nowhere. And I just don't know between them who may end up getting kicked. I mean, after the whole commentary from Maria, where he was repeating all the negative things the men said, without any type of filter that makes it seem like he defended them or said anything on their behalf, I honestly can't imagine him sticking around. But based off of that preview where Chris was going off on somebody, there's a good chance that he might be the one going, or even being the first self-eliminating person of this season, which if he does that, guaranteed we may only end up with 2, maybe 3 final couples. No, we might end up with 3 final couples. But with that said, getting to the final 3, I do think Aries and Phil can make it to the end, but whether they'll last past the Meet the Family episode is going to be very interesting to see. And of course, there's Janelle and Quentin, which again, that Meet the Family episode I think is going to be a very pivotal thing, but unfortunately, that's not for 2 more episodes. And lastly, I want to say Maria and Jessica, and really thinking about it, I think Maria and Jessica, because they're not so pushed to be like some ideal, maybe they could last. But again, this season, it's so hard to tell because from people outright saying it's communication issue to still getting that vibe that it's more so process of elimination and like, this is my person, I love them, I'll defend them. It's really hard to get into what we're being shown as people who are ready to love. So, getting to the review portion, in terms of highlights, Kappa's Janelle definitely was something. And I could only say that it seems like the drama's there to keep you distracted because the show doesn't have much else to offer. So why not get a little teaser preview of what's going to come during the reunion show, especially as all Janelle's little tidbits of calling people the B word and all that and talking down to them is now put in front of everybody, and there could be proper confrontations and conversations. Following that, I do want to give a highlight note to Phil and Aries, and that's just because I like how they're kind of the opposite of Janelle and Quentin. They don't need to be out in everybody's face. They can be secluded. They are probably the only ones to really try to have some type of intimacy, and granted, they're allowed this because nobody's really coming for Phil. And also, Chris decided to stop pursuing Jessica, so they're allowed to have this moment. And a part of me just wishes we got to see more of that. But at the same time, the whole point of the getaway episode, like multiple episodes throughout the season, is so that everybody knows where they stand. And so do the audience members in terms of trying to guess or figure out who's going to end up with who. Which leads to Maria and Jessica being a highlight, and probably said this multiple times at this point, but I just feel like one of the benefits of watching Maria and Jessica is a realization that you don't need to have a partner that's jealous, wanting to touch your feet, or all that stuff we're indoctrinated to believe are different signs of love. It doesn't always have to be something that's notable in a way that can be considered dramatic or overly romantic. Sometimes it's just having somebody there who you can sit with in silence, or just does little nice gestures like brings you a plate of food because they know you're hungry even though you're not saying it. And I think we don't really appreciate that enough. So while I don't know what's going to happen with Maria and also Jessica in the long run, at the very least you can see the type of love that this show doesn't really push too often, since oftentimes it's either going to be something like Janelle and Quentin where it's very dramatic and there's a third party, maybe in a fourth party, who's trying to jump in and like change whose position is what, or else it's very much like Aries and Phil where it's very romantic now, but then we find out during a reunion show they broke up, somebody had some issues, so that was why they're no longer together, which of course they make very vague because they know how people are invested and they don't want that social media backlash. Lastly is a low point, which is that I don't understand Katarina and Lee whatsoever. Quentin clearly is not pursuing either one of them unless there are side conversations off camera that are happening. Because when Janelle is there and they're trying to push up on him, I don't know about you, but I didn't see a single sign that he was entertaining any of them. And even during that fitness class thing where Quentin was really getting into whatever Lee was instructing, yeah, she got a high five, but he wasn't trying to hug her. He wasn't trying to do anything that could be considered more than just friends. So I don't know how either one of those women are keeping hope alive, but bless them. Overall, when it comes to Ready to Love, it still feels very much that as much as Aries and Phil are giving us a version of love, and Maria and Jessica is giving us a different kind, this show still is very much about the drama that happens when there are love triangles, miscommunication, and people who, because they haven't been kicked off due to the process of elimination, they're just in the middle of a struggle of trying to find their place, all for the entertainment of viewers, more so than the education of that person to learn their worth, how to date, or anything that could be considered productive.